Welcome to Module 4 at our PCC 289M class, and we've got Chapter 4 where we're going to be configuring group policies. Let's take a look and see what we got here. Here's our objectives: configuring the settings, security settings, managing administrative templates, security templates, and policy preferences. So, group policy architecture. Let's start with that. Group policy architecture and function involve the following components. You've got the group policy objects themselves, replication, where you replicate the group policy objects between more than one domain controller so they can both be handing out the same group policies, creating and linking the two, scope and inheritance. So we'll talk more about that. Group policy contains policy settings for managing many aspects of domain controllers, servers, computers, and users. So you can affect all those using group policies. And there's two different types. There's local GPOs and there's domain GPOs. Local GPOs are stored on the local computer itself and are edited via Group Policy Object Editor Snap-in. Settings in the local GPOs are inherited from domain GPOs. Can't be changed on the local computer. Only settings that are undefined or not configured can be edited locally. So we run gpedit.msc and we can open a local GPO named Local Computer Policy. And that contains the computer and user configuration settings. So this is what our local group policy editor looks like. You see the same computer and user settings that you would see in a group policy, but it only affects the local computer. Domain group policy objects are stored in Active Directory on domain controllers. And they consist of two separate parts. You've got the group policy template and a group policy container. So the GPT and the GPC. And they have different traits, a naming structure and a folder structure. Knowing the GPO structure, of course, is going to be very important. So the GPT contains all the policy settings that make up a group policy object as well as the related files. Upon creation of a group policy object, the files and subfolders are created. But each GPT folder will contain at least 3 items: the INI file, the machine, and the user information. So that's what a group policy template is going to be. Group policy replication. So GPCs are replicated with Active Directory. GPTs are located in the sysfile share. So whenever you create a domain controller, it creates 2 shares by default, the sysfile and the netlogon. Now the netlogon is actually a subfolder of the sysfile, but it has all that information in there. So, file replication service is used when running in a mixed environment when you have 2008 or older domain controllers. But if you have a 2012 or newer, that's all using distributed file system to replicate the data back and forth. DFSR is far more efficient and reliable. Now we're going to do a lot of DFSR type stuff in our 288 class, but we're going to touch on it here as well. So GPC and GPT can become out of sync. So it is possible for them to not properly synchronize. So you can gather that information and detect it. So there's different tools for managing, creating, and editing group policy objects. And you can go into the Group Policy Management Console, which we'll be doing a lot of in this course, and the Group Policy Management Editor. So if a group policy object that's already linked to a container changes in policy settings, take effect as soon as the clients download them. So if I go to make a change to a group policy object, it doesn't affect the user until it gets downloaded to that particular computer. So there's more than one way to do that. One is I could restart my computer. The other is I could just run gp update/force. It gets downloaded and then it gets applied. To edit any type of group policy object, you go in the Management Console, click Edit, and we'll open up the dialog that allows you to make changes to that group policy object. So it's possible to make changes to the default domain policy, but it's not advisable. I like to make a different group policy object for every different type of change I want to make. So if I want to make changes to the security settings, I'll make a security group policy object. If I want to make a change to the printer settings, I'll make a printer group policy object. And that way I can more easily tell what each of these do rather than trying to hunt through them all to try to figure out what these policies are doing, or what the default domain policy is doing. A recommended method for making changes to domain policies is creating a new GPO and then of course linking it to the domain. And the GPOs are applied to objects in reverse of the specified link order. And that could be a quiz alert, so keep track of that. So there's two ways to create a new group policy object using the management console. You can right-click on the container, whether it's at the root level of the domain or any one of the organizational units, and choose to create a GPO in this domain and link it here. By doing that, it makes it apply to whatever users or computers are in there based on the policy that you create. So the best practice is to create GPOs that focus on a category of settings. So like I said, printer settings, security settings, etc. Now there is a starter GPO, which is being used as a template. And you can certainly use this starter GPO if you want. The new GPO wizard includes an option to use the starter GPO, and it's stored in the GPOs folder in the management console. So to use one of these starter GPOs, select one of them in the starter GPO list box. And there's several in there. Or right-click a starter GPO and click New GPO from Starter GPO. So you can make a copy of the starter GPO. And to create a starter GPO, right-click a folder and click New. Settings in computer configuration take precedence over settings in user configuration. So remember, we talked about there's two different types of changes you can make in a group policy. One is that affects the user, no matter what computer they log onto. The other affects the computer, no matter who logs onto it. So if you have a computer and a user setting that conflict with each other, then Active Directory, as I mentioned earlier, is going to make a decision as to who wins. And by default, the computer configuration is going to win over a user configuration if it sees a conflict. So 3 folders under the Policies folder are Software, Windows, and Administrative Templates. Policy settings can be managed or unmanaged. So if you choose Manage Policies, reset to Not Configured when the object falls outside of the scope, whereas unmanaged policies are persistent. So software installation. It contains the software installation extension. And I've tried to use software installation on multiple occasions. Sometimes it works great, sometimes it doesn't. Typically, if it's a Microsoft application, it works pretty well, such as Microsoft Office, things like that. But if you're going to use a third party, many times it just doesn't work right. And there's not a lot of log files to tell you why. Applications are deployed with the Windows Installer Service, which is a part of every computer, and that uses Microsoft Software Installation, MSI files. So we're not talking about EXE files, we're only talking about MSIs. MSI is a collection of files packaged into a single file with an MSI. So you could have several executable files along with its supporting INI files, etc., that would create an MSI. And you can create your own MSIs using various different tools. The MSIs contain instructions for the Windows installer that it needs to use to install the application correctly. So you can see the software settings under computer configuration. That talks about where the software installation is, and you can go and set up your MSI to get installed. Software installation extension performs the same function in the user configuration mode. So it works the same way in the user side, but again, don't conflict user and device. Software package can only be assigned to a computer, but there are 2 options for deploying software to users. So you've got published and you've got assigned. The published option is not installed automatically. You actually have to go to the link in Control Panel and Programs and Features in order to install, and you'll see the link there. They'll say, hey, would you like to install Office? Click here, and it'll install it, or whatever program. The assigned one is installed automatically. So as soon as the user logs in, then the application installation happens. So it really depends on whether you want to force this application on the user or you want it to be an option. A script is a series of commands saved in a text file. Scripts are typically saved as a batch file or .bat. I've made many scripts over the years, and you can have it automatically run a script when the person logs in. So there's lots of different things you can do with a script. You can install software, you can install printers, you can map network drives, lots of different things. So if it's computer configuration, you go to the start shutdown scripts, not shut up. And then if it's a user configuration, you go to the log on, log off. But it'll do basically the same thing. So you've got the logon properties here. This is the script. It's a logon.bat file, and you can go ahead and add that into group policy, and it will automatically start when that person logs on. And script writing does take a little bit of experience, depending on what it is that you want to do, but they can be very powerful. Folder redirection. This is really helpful because a lot of users by default will save their files locally on their computer, especially in their documents folder. Folder redirection makes it look like they're saving it to their local computer, but in reality, it's actually saving it to the server. And you do that using a group policy called folder redirection. It applies strictly to user accounts, not to computers, and it's found only under the user configuration note. So some group policy object settings are applied to both users and computers, and some are just one or the other. There are 13 folders you can redirect, and to redirect folder, right-click it in the direction and click Properties. So here is the folder redirection on the left-hand side, and on the right-hand side we see all of the different folders that you can redirect back to the server. And it'll save them to a profile location of your choice on the server, and that's where you can back those up. So instead of running backup programs on all your individual computers, you can just run backup programs on the servers themselves. So here is the target area. You've got basic, redirect everyone's folder to the same location, or you can make a change to that, and so it goes to a specific area as well. And that's the location. Local policies for auditing applies to what users can and can't do on the local computer to which they log on. So you can audit events such as log on, log off, file and folder access. So I have been called by many different owners of companies saying, hey, somebody deleted some files and we don't know who they are, can you figure it out? Well, you can only figure it out if you've set up auditing ahead of time. You can't set it up after the fact. But auditing can tell you all these different things. If a file's been moved, been deleted, been copied, lots of different things. However, it generates a huge amount of log files. So you have to have a large amount of space available, and then you have to automatically delete the older logs once it gets built up to a certain amount. So here is the audit logon events. You can see by default that's turned on to success or failure. So if somebody fails to log on, that's automatically audited. But all these other options for auditing, they are not turned on. So you can go in, enable those, and then tell where you want those to be logged. And you find those when you go into the Event Viewer Security area, and you can see all of these different audit files. So 2 steps for auditing objects. You've got to enable the audit object access policy for both success and failure. Either success, failure, or both. And then you need to enable auditing on the target object as well. So you have to right-click on the folder or the drive and then go and turn auditing on there. So once it's enabled in group policy and the target object, then it'll go ahead and start auditing that information. So user rights define the actions users can take on a computer. There's 40 different user right policies that can be assigned. So of course there's a lot of different logs that this can generate. The default domain policy specifies user right assignments, policies, and etc. So let's go ahead and take a look at that local security policy one more time. Again, the user rights assignment is on the left-hand side, and all the different things that you can set up for user rights are on the right-hand side. So allow logon locally is a popular one. Change the system time, change the time zone. These are all the things that a specific user can or can't do. And on the right-hand side, it shows what users are assigned to that group. So you can see everyone can bypass traverse checking. However, to create a page file, only administrators can do that. So you can scroll down and you can add or delete users as you need to. So includes 100 settings. One category of security policies to configure right away is the user account control policies. And this determines what happens on a computer when a user attempts to perform an action where it requires that they have elevated rights in order to do it. So they could end up getting prompted for elevated rights, and they could choose yes if they have those rights. If it doesn't, then it'll say, sorry, you don't have it, but it'll still log it anyway, so you can audit that information. So there's some additional commonly configured settings as well that you can also set up. Administrative template files. These are XML formatted files, and they define policies in the administrative templates folder. So there's lots of different templates here that you can choose. Computer configuration settings, user configuration, etc., etc. And using these templates are really good because they have some of the more commonly used tactics for group policy objects. So it's very nice to be able to use those templates when it makes sense for your organization. That way you don't have to set up everything individually and figure it out on your own. So browsing Group Policy Management Editor, you can familiarize yourself where to look when you need to configure a particular type of policy setting. So it's really a good idea to go and take a look at this. Take a look at some of these different settings. It's very difficult to remember where they are, so you can easily do Google searches and other things to find specific settings. But it's good to familiarize yourself with them. All right, so this is the computer configuration setting. You've got not configured, enabled, disabled, and then you've got the location, you've got the path, etc. One thing of note you should notice is where it says not configured. And when something's not configured, in the right-hand side in this lower corner, it'll tell you whether it's enabled or disabled if you choose not configured. Because it has to be one or the other, right? So this is supported on, it says at least Windows Server 12, Windows 8, or Windows RT. So if you see something that says it's only supported on Windows XP and you've got Windows 10, then you can configure this policy all day, but it's not going to do anything. So it's a good idea to double check that. So that particular configuration setting was setting the home folder for the user. All right, so user configuration settings continued here. We've got administrative templates. In user configuration node contains the same folders as the computer configuration node, so it's a similar template, but with different settings that apply to users. Policies include the desktop, controls the look of the user's desktop. So if you have a company there, you have a certain logo you want for the desktop background, you could do that. You could also decide on shared folders and control whether a user can publish a shared folder or DFS an Active Directory. We have something called the ADMX Central Store. These are templates, administrative templates are collections of policy definition files in this XML format, referred to as ADMX files because of their extension. And they specify registry entries that should be controlled and the type of data the entries take. So there's a central store for maintaining these ADMX files. And to create the central store, you can go in and set up these policy definitions, and this is where it is. Security templates are text files with an INF extension, and these contain information to define the policy settings. So what would you use a security template for? Well, to create and deploy security settings to a local or domain GPO. You could also use it to verify security settings on a computer against the settings in a template. So tools for working with security templates, you've got the security template snap-in and the security configuration and analysis snap-in. So these templates can be used to create security templates for use with computers that require different security settings. You might have servers with different roles installed that require different settings than servers with other roles installed. So when a user creates a template, it's stored under the user's documents folder in security templates. Then after that template is created, it can be imported into a local or a domain group policy object. So here's the security templates snap-in. You've got the MMC you can run from command prompt, and then you add in the security templates, and you can see the DC sec template for a DC security template. So it's already pre-configured to a certain level. You can go in and customize it if you want. Security configuration and analysis, useful for checking a computer's existing security settings against the known settings in a security templates file. So you can also apply this security template to a computer. Analyzing current security settings against the template creates a report. So these reports can come up with 5 different results. You've got an X in a red circle indicating a mismatch. A check mark in green indicates a match. So you've got several different things that tells you when this analysis runs, whether you've got a problem or whether you've got it configured correctly. Item level targeting enables you to target specific users or computers based on criteria. So you can have things apply to everybody except for these specific users or computers. So you can specify, say, only portable computers, like laptops that are docked and they have a specific preference applied. So you could say laptops get one thing, but desktops get another. And that might be because laptops leave the building, so they're required to have maybe BitLocker running, but desktops are not. So that would be one good way to have an item level target. So here's a target. You can see here the operating system is Windows 10 and a battery is present. Well, that way we know for sure this is a portable device that could leave the building. And the product is Windows 10. So you can add items and collections into that and specify what can and can't happen. So we talked about group policy, using the tools to configure that. Group policy replication. We talked about redirection. We talked about some of the templates that you can use, and both local and domain, and what the difference is there, and the central store and security templates as well. So that will do it for Module 4. And of course, you've got your lab involved, and we've got lots of help for that. You can email, you can call, and help you out. And of course, don't forget the mini videos that are inside the labs that will show you how to do